Perfect. Well, I am so eager to be here with you all today and welcome you to the first edition of the Climate Pod series. This is a series that sets out to explore the critical nexuses within the unfolding climate crisis in an effort to further relate this often impersonal megatopic. So using the global goals as a roadmap, we are going to continue to explore the story and the larger narrative surrounding the often hard to hold topic that is climate change and the unfolding crisis therein. Quick introduction. My name is Stephen Carlson. I'm proud to represent the Youth Climate Leaders Global Network, a partner in coordinating these pods. Quick overview, YCL, as we call it, is a youth-led network. It's equipping its members with opportunities to connect and engage in solutions to the climate crisis through climate careers, and actions. It started 2 years ago in Brazil, and has since grown to have representatives, or as we call them, YCLers, from 20 plus countries. So this Livable Cities pod will feature some incredible knowledge and action leaders over this afternoon as well as tomorrow. So before my colleague Karina dives into that agenda, I want to pass along a few quick logistical notes as you all are here in Zoom meeting. We're trying to keep the noise and or unintended interferences to a minimum. So we're going to ask everybody to stay on mute. However, we're encouraging everyone to participate, especially in the Q&A with some of those guest speakers of our sessions. And we're asking everybody to use the chat box for that. These sessions with those invited speakers will be recorded. However, the between these sessions, we'll also be having activities, some narrative and storytelling activities. These will not be recorded. So just to kind of give you some information about that. And I hand it over to Karina.
Thanks, Steve. That was a great introduction. And I'm Karina Weinstein, and I am Program Director at FXB USA. FXB is an international organization that works in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, empowering the most vulnerable communities to lift themselves out of poverty. We were founded with the mission to implement the Convention on the Rights of the Child, really advocating for children's rights. And so we know that climate change is the child rights issue of the 21st century. And for FXB, it makes a lot of sense to really focus on climate change as well. And we do that through empowering young people to become advocates for the climate emergency, to have the tools and skills that they need to take action and to build community. So so to that end, Steve and I have collaborated for the past number of months on organizing these climate pods to provide young people with additional opportunities to reflect, to share, to learn, and to really take away concrete skills and knowledge to move forward and to take action. So I will walk you through a little bit what our next few hours together look like. First, we're really thrilled that we will have a keynote address by Elizabeth Bagley, Director of Project Drawdown Learn. We'll spend the next hour with her. Then between 5 and 6, we will engage in reflective and narrative practices as a group for those who are able to stay on. And at 6 p.m., we will have a panel moderated by an NYU student, Ria, who will present the two panelists, Dr. Joe Bufford and Dr. Dickey, who are both professors at the NYU School of Global Public Health. So it's going to be a great hour. Without really further ado, I will introduce really briefly Elizabeth Bagley and hand it over to her. I urge all of you to type in questions into the chat box during the talk as they come up, and then we will take these questions at the end of her presentation and pose these questions to Elizabeth. So as I mentioned, Elizabeth Bagley is the Director of Project Drawdown, specifically of Project Drawdown Learn. And in that role, Elizabeth designs experiences, initiatives, and tools to connect people with research, relevant, and relatable information about climate change solutions that we can take to help everyone thrive, the people and the planet. So thank you, Elizabeth, so much for making time to speak with us. And I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Karina. Thank you, Stephen and YCL and FXB. And thanks to everybody who tuned in today and is going to stay on later today and into tomorrow. I am just thrilled that you are taking the time out of your busy lives to really focus on climate solutions. So I was asked today to talk about myself. So that's a pretty a fun opportunity. And I thought that I would start by with a few slides, kind of showing you where I've been and kind of how I got to be where I am today. So I'm going to start with my road. There we go. All right. So hopefully everybody can see the slides to my path to helping the world reach drawdown. So this path actually started, interestingly, I'm sitting here right now in Spring Valley, Wisconsin, where that little dot is on the map. I grew up in Western Wisconsin, and specifically, I grew up here, which is here. I'm sitting in that house right now. We're at my family's on the farm right now. And this is where I spent my time really exploring and figuring out how the world worked. And one of the ways I did that was through connecting with the animals we had. We had sheep, we had goats. This is a kid goat that I'm holding as a 3-year-old. And really trying to understand how all of these natural systems and human systems interconnected. So this is where my connection to nature started, and it's where my understanding of the world really started to take place and take shape. But I wasn't always on the farm. I did have to do lots of chores, even in high school, coming home from school and doing chores before going out to run cross country or track or play basketball. And on weekends, I spent my time here, which is incredibly normal in Wisconsin, which is at a cheese factory. So you can all laugh at me because that's a pretty funny Wisconsin realm that I worked at a cheese factory, not specifically making the cheese, but I actually worked cutting huge logs of cheese and selling it to people. So I was in retail, and that retail experience for me really was critical, right? So I grew up in this small town of 1,000 people on a farm, but being able to connect with people in the retail space, and even though it was just cutting some cheese and handing it to them, gave me an opportunity to meet people where they're at and provide something for them that helped them get through their day or the days ahead. And that's where I started to think a lot about the ways in which we support people every day in our lives with all of the different things that are buzzing through our heads. And that's the connection that I want to make to the environment. We all are on different journeys. We all are at very different places on our sustainability journeys. How can we, as ambassadors for the environment, really meet people where they're at and help them take that next step on their sustainability journey? So one of the ways that I started on my journey was actually through reading works by Aldo Leopold. I never got to meet Aldo Leopold. He passed away well before I was born, but he wrote the seminal book called A Sand County Almanac. And my high school environmental science teacher assigned it to us my senior year, and it blew me away. It blew me away because he said things like this, and I quote, "A thing is right when it tends to preserve the beauty, stability, and integrity of the community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise." And this is an image of someone paddling in the Boundary Waters canoe area in wilderness. And this is a space where I visited as a high schooler with my family. We went on 2 family vacations growing up, one to Disney World. And I won't talk much about that because it was kind of like National Lampoon's Family Vacation where everything went wrong that could go wrong. But we also went to the Boundary Waters. And in the Boundary Waters, that was my first taste of wilderness. That was an opportunity for me to really see what this incredible landscape that had relatively little influence from humans looked and felt like. And I started to think about how I could be part of a community that where, you know, we knew we connected with people and it really made a ripple effect, right? To stick with a water analogy, where we were able to ripple amazing actions out into the world. And so I started to think about systems. I started to think beyond just the biology test answers tomorrow and what I needed to do to get an A on a test. And I started to think about, you know, why do we care about the right answer in biology? And how do we make sure, instead of just getting, you know, the answer to be A, how do we make sure we understand whether or not a system is healthy and what can my role be in that? So what I decided to do was hang out with some of these people. And here's my prom picture, everybody. So here's my prom picture from way back in, I'll date myself here, 1997. And these people who you see around me actually became incredible community members at taking the next step on environmental action. So we started a science club. We met with all of the school administrators and said, you know what? There are a number of areas in our town that really need to be picked up, and we want to do that. So what will it take? We ended up getting a day out of school where the whole high school went and did cleanups in different areas of town and really galvanized support and action around the environment. And that whetted my appetite as kind of the first taste of building community. So while I really loved building community in Spring Valley, as it was getting to be time to go off to college, here is my my senior year memories, where I said some of the things I'll miss the most are the landscape, my family and friends, but the things I would miss the least are the lack of new challenging experiences. So I decided to go to school about 4 hours away at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, home of Bucky Badger, who you see prominently displayed here. And I was very sure, 100% sure that I was going to be a medical doctor. I was taking all the pre-med classes, and then I was stuck in this class that was initially, it was in 3 chunks. So genetics was the first chunk, and that was okay. And the second chunk was ecology. And in our ecology chunk, we got to go out into a nearby prairie and do prairie restoration work. That is very hard for me to say. And when we were doing that restoration work, I fell in love. I loved being outside. I loved thinking about that system. And everyone else in my class, all 100 other people, hated it. And I said, ooh, this is a great thing to notice. This is really important to notice that I am loving this. A lot of other people are not loving this. Maybe I'm not in the right place. So I decided, you know, I'm not going to give up totally on that medical profession dream. What I'm going to do, I forgot about this one. Sorry. I'm going to find a community. So a community I found, and you can go ahead and judge me as a total nerd here. I played trumpet in the UW marching band. And that was an incredible experience, coming from a small town of 1,000 people to a university of 40,000 people, to have 300 instant friends in the band, where we played at football games, as you can see this image here, basketball games, all the sporting events, and really found a community of people right away. But it wasn't the community of people who I'd want to work with necessarily on climate work long term. And this wasn't the community either. I didn't want to do the kind of work I did for a semester at Walgreens as a pharmacy technician, where this was my view. My view was from the behind the counters and the rows and rows of different drugs. I realized, you know what, this is actually not the community that I want to be part of, the community that I want to work to change. So what instead I decided to do was apply for a job at the Minnesota Conservation Corps. And I did that between my freshman and sophomore years of college. And that was an opportunity for me to work with high school youth and to go out into different natural areas, state parks, regional parks, and build trails and do different conservation projects with partners all over the place. And that was where I really realized how much I loved working with youth. I loved working with youth. I loved working outside, and I loved connecting people to the environment, especially most of whom in the Minnesota Conservation Corps, most of the youth who had grown up in cities and didn't necessarily see a role for themselves in the environment. So I realized throughout my work with the Minnesota Conservation Corps that I was really interested in working with youth, but I wasn't sure that I wanted to be a teacher. So what I did my sophomore year in college was study from these 2 incredible men. Harold Shoib with the awesome orange tie. He was the African storyteller, and his classroom was packed to the brim with 500 students, and he would stand up and he told stories about his time in Africa, and I was riveted. He really helped me realize the power that stories have to connect with people. That's one of the things I love about the new climate narratives that you all are thinking about, is just the power of stories, and how by telling our stories, which I'm sharing mine with you today, by telling the stories of other people and their experiences, and really giving voice to the voiceless, giving voice to those who have voices, but yet amplifying those voices, we can really start to shift culture. We can start to shift towards action and implementing climate solutions. So Harold Shoaib really inspired me to think about ways to tell stories, whereas Cal DeWitt, who has an incredible background in that image, he was telling stories about the environment. And we were learning in his class about the metabolism of the city, which sounds really weird, right? I mean, I was thinking I was going to be pre-med, understanding the metabolism of a human. He was talking about the metabolism of a city, and how the city is a complex system designed by humans, where we have things like humane societies, wastewater treatment plants, landfills, that all work together as systems that humans have created for us to live well on this planet. Now, one thing to think about, since you are thinking about livable cities, is that all of those systems that I just mentioned are systems that humans created. And that is an incredible opportunity for us to reinvent them, or and co-create them with other people, to make sure that the co-benefits are being realized. That those cities, the ways in which they're designed, are not just being designed for one group of people, but rather for equity and equality for all. And we think about how people and the environment can both thrive together throughout those systems. So I was at this turning point where I said, oh my gosh, I love learning about stories about Africa. I'm loving learning stories about the environment. I spent that next summer back in my hometown. Here's a picture of Spring Valley, and that reservoir in the background is the O'Galley Reservoir, and there's a huge campground behind it. And I worked as a park ranger for that summer and the summer after, and realized that, you know what, I don't actually want to be park ranger. So I closed another door, or I guess slightly nudged it closed. I didn't slam it closed. And I realized that I needed to find a place where I could learn more stories, I could learn from other people, and really expand my worldview. So enter Kenya. This is not Kenya, this is a sea turtle. But when I was in Kenya, I had the incredible opportunity to monitor sea turtle nesting sites, transplant coral reefs, and teach science to 7th graders. And one day, the 7th graders and I noticed that the water on the ocean was really murky. This is what it looked like. This is just off the coast of northern Kenya, which is in East Africa. And our community had been cutting down the mangrove trees along the shore to use the wood for cooking. And without the natural filters that the mangroves provide, there were sediments flowing into the ocean, and that clouded the water. But where had the sediments come from? We hadn't had rain in months. So it was pretty unlikely that the soil was from our area. I had just spent my winter break climbing Mount Kenya. And during that trek, I noticed that the people living on the mountain were cutting down the trees, just like we were cutting down trees in Mukokoni, so that they could use the wood for cooking. And I hadn't made the connection when I saw it on Mount Kenya. But in that moment on the ocean, face to face with people who depended on a healthy ocean for survival, I realized that the sediments were coming all the way from the slopes of Mount Kenya. Cutting down trees on Mount Kenya meant that when the upcountry monsoon rains came, the mountain soil washed off into the river, which flowed to the ocean. The upstream actions were directly impacting the well-being of the people living downstream. And it became apparent that the ocean that we depended on was part of this interconnected system that was so much bigger than any one person or community. It was part of a system that intimately connected people to each other and to the natural world. And that moment unlocked and solidified my passion to increase people's understanding of and a willingness to take care of the interconnected ecological systems that shape our lives. So I left Kenya, finished my last year of college, and joined Teach for America. I decided I wanted to understand a different system, the education system. I strongly believed, and I still believe, that all children should have the opportunity to obtain an excellent education, regardless of their zip code. I was teaching in South Louisiana, in a very small town, and specifically at North Central High School. I was teaching 8th through 12th grade science. And here I am in my classroom, and I learned so much from the youth in my classroom. And during that time, I realized that there was so much more work to be done, and that my interest in the environment and my interest in education needed to find a way to intersect. So that next summer, I spent in Glacier National Park. I spent it in Glacier National Park as a naturalist with the Glacier Institute, where I led programs for people all over the world, connecting people to nature. But I realized that it shouldn't take a trip to Glacier National Park to connect people with nature and the natural systems that we are fortunate enough to have. So after teaching another year in Louisiana, I decided to go to graduate school, where I took an unconventional approach and designed video games. You might be wondering, why in the world would you go from tree hugging Glacier National Park, goat hugging Spring Valley farm life, to designing video games? Were you a crazy gamer? No, I wasn't. I wasn't much of a gamer at all. However, games can be incredibly powerful tools for unlocking understanding. And even when my sons play a lot of Fortnite, I still have to remember that they're understanding these complex systems as well. So designing video games really helped me create scenarios that were really challenging, that helped people understand impacts within interconnected systems. So video games allow people to do things that are too risky, too expensive, too dangerous, too complex, and kind of peel back the layers of the onion to really get to the core of the system and then build it back better. So I built ways for people to see cities as living, breathing systems that we can co-create. And I hope that through the work that you're going to do with Livable Cities, you're able to think about the systems, the ways that they interact, and the ways that we want them to be, in terms of really supporting the least fortunate of us, along with everyone else along the way. So again, because these systems have been created by humans, we have the incredible power to recreate them and redesign them. So video games also allowed me to make the invisible visible, to allow people to do all these crazy things that they can't do in the real world. And I love the possibility of reaching huge audiences through games. So I did a summer internship at the Walt Disney Company, which provided me with the opportunity to work with a team of artists, game designers, educators, and fantastically creative Imagineers. One piece of advice I'd have for all of you is to find diverse and creative teams to work with. That is my fuel. I love working with people who have different skill sets, different interests. I love co-creating, and that I got a great taste of that when I was at the Walt Disney Company. So after graduate school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, except I knew one thing very solidly. Even though I'd kind of partially closed some doors along the way, I actually really closed the door on being a pharmacy technician. I knew I didn't want to do that. I still didn't really know how to find what I wanted to do, how to find where to really fuel my passion. And so I was lucky enough in my last semester to take an HR class at the university, focus on something called StrengthsFinder 2.0. And StrengthsFinder is, you get a book and you get a code and you take a quiz. They have it for young people. They have it for a couple different flavors of StrengthsFinder. So I highly encourage you to check it out if you're interested in learning a little bit more about yourself, because I knew I didn't want to be an academic, but I didn't really know where I fit. And you can see I circled my strengths. The way that the assessment works is it gives you your top 5 strengths. I really wanted to be more in relationship building, influencing, strategic thinking, specifically around, and somewhere where I could be really positive. And up until this point, I hadn't looked at the climate movement very much because it was pretty darn depressing. And I didn't see a role for myself in it. I didn't want to be in that space. And so in the meantime, holding on to each of these strengths, I decided to try something else out. And I moved to California and accepted a position at Leapfrog, which is an educational entertainment company. And I was a learning designer there, specifically developing content for 3 to 9-year-olds. But it got a little tiresome after designing baby animal name games for years, and realized that what I really wanted to do instead was reach people of all ages and meet them where they're at. So when a job at the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco opened up, I leapt at that opportunity. So I was there as a director of sustainability for 3.5 years, and I got to do some incredible work because of our reach. We had over 1.2 million people coming through our doors every year. And we had the opportunity to have personal connections with our guests, meeting them where they're at on their sustainability journeys. And we were able to share stories of hope. You might have noticed that one of the skills that I have, and one of my strengths, is positivity. I wanted to make sure that we could instill hope, we could instill positivity, and stories that were filled with solutions, so that people would want to stand up and work to make change and build community in their local communities. I also got to hold a penguin. So I wanted to put this in here because you never know when you take a job, what kinds of things you might get to hold. Always say yes. I would say always try to hold cool things, right? Because how many of you can say that you've held penguins? Hopefully some of you. And another crazy thing I got to do, this one maybe you don't want to hold, but I got to help with a whale necropsy. So this was a blue whale that had washed ashore, and we determined the cause of death was a ship strike. So the ship had struck and killed the whale, and we had to, it's kind of gross, sorry to make it, you see a disgusting dead whale, but incredible experience in terms of understanding kind of the complexity of systems. And we ended up working with the state of California to change the shipping lanes so that the ships weren't coming into the Bay Area through the areas where the whales were sleeping. So another great way to collect data to inform policy and implement that policy change to save lives for marine mammals. And then the biggest thing that I got to do at the Academy of Sciences was co-create Planet Vision, which was a program focused on solutions for a better world. And I realized this is where I want to be. I want to focus on solutions for a better world. And I really wanted to change the conversation from doom and gloom to hope, possibility, and solutions. One step in that direction was actually the opportunity to create and record the Employee's Guide to Sustainability, which is a course for LinkedIn Learning. So feel free to check it out if you want to learn a little bit. It's about an hour-long course, all about different aspects of sustainability. And it's thankfully been viewed by thousands of people since it launched on Earth Day of this year, which is pretty exciting. So all of that led me to mid-March, where I took a job at Project Drawdown, the world's leading resource for climate solutions. You might start to see all the pieces fit together now, right? You're saying, okay, she wants to work on solutions. Now she's going to work on climate. Let's do this, people. Let's do it. So in 2017, our organization published a New York Times bestseller, which really helped us emerge as a leading resource for information and insight about climate solutions. Educators, youth, cities, universities, loads of people have used Drawdown content to help inform their next steps on their sustainability journeys. Great news for you all. We have a brand new free publication on our website, drawdown.org. It's called the Drawdown Review, and I highly recommend checking it out. It's incredible. So I don't work alone. We have a small team of just 7 of us, but we are surrounded by an incredible group of research fellows who scan the landscape of climate solutions to see what kinds of solutions are out there that can be implemented at scale to really get us to drawdown. Well, what in the world is drawdown? Well, drawdown is a scientific term which indicates the future point in time when levels of heat-trapping gases stop climbing and start to steadily decline. That right there is a moment of drawdown, and it is a crucial turning point for life on Earth, one that we must reach as quickly, as safely, and equitably as possible. So how do we get there? How do we achieve drawdown? And what can you do in your communities to achieve drawdown? Well, first, let's start by understanding where these heat-trapping gases are coming from. So let's imagine that all of the heat-trapping gases that humans are contributing to the atmosphere fit into this nice little rectangle. Here's where they're coming from. They're coming from electricity production. They're coming from food, agriculture, and land use, industry, transportation, buildings, and other energy-related emissions. Okay, well, this could be really depressing if this is where we stop, but thankfully, nature does us an enormous favor and removes about 40% of the heat-trapping gases that we put into the atmosphere. This is nature all by itself doing what it does best. But unfortunately, about 60% of those heat-trapping gases are left behind, and they create a thick blanket around the planet. And knowing where those heat-trapping gases come from And knowing where they go can help us identify the suite of climate solutions that we can implement to reach drawdown. So here we are. We've got 3 S's of solutions. The first solution is focusing on sources, so we can stop those sources of heat trapping gases. We can also, second S, support sinks. So reducing sources, supporting sinks, which means enhancing and supporting what nature is already doing, those carbon sinks that are found in nature. And the third S is we can improve society. We can help society achieve broader transformations. So these 3 interconnected S's of solutions, sources, sinks, and society, are the 3 areas for action, which we need to pursue globally, simultaneously, and with determination. And as you can see from this framework, there are many areas that you in your communities right now can start to leverage. What might it look like if you think about addressing food waste in your community? What about enhancing efficiency or shifting to renewable energy in your community? How might those cities become even more livable if we put some of these solutions into action? So these are overviews of climate solutions in hand now, today. I'm not going to go into detail with these. I invite you to check out the Drawdown Review, where we go into exhaustive detail about the range of solutions, including lots of numerical calculations about the cost and the greenhouse gas emission reduction potential and other metrics that matter in the world. So today I want to talk about reaching drawdown and beginning to come back into balance with the planet's living systems. You know, these solutions that we have are tools of possibility in the face of a seemingly impossible challenge. Widespread awareness and understanding of climate solutions is vital to kindle agency and affect change worldwide. That's one huge way that you can play a role in climate conversation. You can talk about the solutions with everyone in your life. You have a voice and you can use it, which is an incredible tool that we can all use. People and institutions of all kinds in all places have roles to play in this great transformation. And the solutions that we discussed today are a synthesis of collective wisdom and collective action that are unfolding across the globe. And one thing I want to really mention today is that beyond addressing heat trapping gases, climate solutions can have co-benefits that contribute to a better, more equitable world. Climate solutions are rarely just climate solutions. For example, those that protect and restore ecosystems are also biodiversity solutions. Many climate solutions create jobs, they foster resilience to climate impacts like storms and droughts, and they bring other environmental benefits such as safeguarding water resources. Climate solutions can advance social and economic equity if they're utilized wisely and well, with attention to who decides, who benefits, and how any drawbacks are mitigated. So for all of us in this space, it takes intention, care, and courage to move solutions forward in ways that heal rather than deepen systemic injustices. We have the opportunity and the obligation to co-create systems that are safe and equitable, ensuring that both people and the planet can thrive together. So today I want us to think about how we might look across all of these solutions and start to think of ways to implement these in our communities, to make more livable cities, to really reap those co-benefits. Here's a sneak peek at all of the solutions that we've reviewed as part of Project Drawdown. I understand it's completely unreadable because it's very small, but the great news is that there are so many solutions. There are so many solutions that you can put into place and really meet your communities where they're at. What's the next best step for your community to take? Who can you bring together to put these solutions in action so that people and the planet can thrive together? And and what level do you want to work at? Do you want to work on individual behavior change? Do you want to work at the community level, an organizational level, governmental, regional, national, global scales? There's room for all of us under this tent. And it takes a whole ecosystem of activities and actors to create and accelerate the transformation that's required. Because we are living in a time of dramatic transformation. The basics of physics, chemistry, and biology of the planet make that non-negotiable. Stasis is not an option. So society has a choice to make about what shape that transformation will take. Will we employ collective courage and determination and the diversity of existing solutions to move the world towards a balance with the planet's living systems? Will we pursue climate action in ways that heal systemic injustices and foster resilience, well-being, and equality? Who will we choose to be in this pivotal moment of human history? Because together, we can leverage the solutions at hand today to build a bridge from where we are right now to the world that we want for ourselves, for all life, and most importantly, for generations yet to come. A better path is still possible. So may we turn that possibility into reality. And by doing that, we can sustain the places that we call home. Thanks so much, everybody.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. That was incredible. I was laughing, cheering, all of the above. Thank you so much for those words. That positivity, you can feel it coming through the screen. So really appreciate that. I encourage anyone with any questions, please take to the chat. I do have one question though, as far as, and I think you did such a good job of explaining your trajectory and how it's not always, it's not very linear. It can go left, it can go right, you can go kind of all sorts of different directions. I guess one question would be the advice to take a first step. Oftentimes, and you mentioned it a few times, Elizabeth, it is quite daunting. You look at everything when we're talking about things, and in our age of information, we receive a lot. So it's oftentimes very difficult to have all this information on our shoulders and at the same time be able to focus enough so we can take that first step. So do you have any, and you did kind of share this with your trajectory, but any advice for us as far as taking that first step, if you would? Maybe kind of a mindset or any of the above that you have, as far as.
Sure, thanks, Stephen. One thing that took me quite a while to learn that might be helpful is just to be gentle with yourself, right? That you might not, there's no one perfect path for everyone. And the meanders, I think, are what build, that's what make us interesting, right? That's what makes us, what brings us, creates our story and helps us show up as a unique individual in the world. So, I definitely spent some time beating myself up. Like, well, why don't you have this figured out yet? Why isn't this a perfectly clear path? And just learning the importance of being gentle and taking the time to explore and to be curious and to go down paths that might be dead ends, but at least you went down them and you learned. And so in terms of how to get to that place, I think, and this might be hard for, I think about, some of my dear friends who are more introverted, but talking to people, reaching out, like networking, doing informational interviews, asking people if you can shadow them, even in today's day, if it's just like, what does a day of Zoom calls for you look like? And really getting a sense for what it means to create your identity. And because there's lots of different ways we can create our identities, and it doesn't hurt to try different things on. So, but through all of that, I would just say, be gentle. There's not any, one right answer. And if we put too much pressure on ourselves, it takes all the fun out of it. And if it takes the fun out of it, nobody wants to do it. So that's a lot more than you asked for, Stephen.
But brilliant nonetheless. I love it. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I think this is a good segue as well. Got a question as far as background. So a lot of us, right, we're thinking, once again, coming out of a traditional academic setting, if you would, and or a career transfer or a career move, if you don't have a background in the sustainability sector, how do you kind of move into that field, as most organizations, companies, etc., are potentially looking for folks with experience and or a degree. So maybe if you have any insight, and you with your trajectory as well, it's very interesting. So maybe if you could just kind of share a few words on that.
Absolutely. I think, I'll tell you that when I hired a couple of people at the Academy of Sciences, and neither of them had any background in sustainability, because I didn't care. Now, of course, I can't speak for everyone hiring in that space, but oftentimes what we're looking for, especially in the sustainability field, is someone who is a systems thinker and can think about complexity without getting overwhelmed, and can kind of find a way through that complexity to find the pearl, to figure out, how might we make something work better and more sustainable within this complexity. I'm always looking for someone who uses their voice, either through the written word or through the spoken word, so that we can communicate, because so much of what we do is storytelling and making sure that people are comfortable connecting with people. One of the things that I don't look for and I actively avoid is actually a sense of righteousness, right? Someone who feels that they are better than others because of actions that they have individually taken. We're all at different places, folks, right? Like, and to be kind of holier than thou and to say, well, I can't believe that you just ate a piece of bacon and you are a sustainability person. We don't have to be mean or judgy or righteous about it, right? Like, let's meet people where they're at. We don't know what's going on in that person's life. Let's figure out what the best next step for that person is, and really be empathetic. So empathy is something I definitely look for. So if people aren't, let's say that you're applying for a job at Nike to work in their sustainable supply chain. To get there, you are going to have some knowledge of what it means to have what a supply chain looks like and how those connections could be made. But you also might have a background in community organizing. I have a good friend at Levi's who works in the sustainability realm, specifically though with the women who work in the factories that make the Levi's. So she goes to the factories and she talks to the women about, hey, what would make your life better? And so she listens to the women and she says, okay, great. They want a day off during the week so they can go to the bank and they can visit their kids' schools and all these things. And that's part of sustainability as well, right? Like making sure that we are creating these environments for people to thrive. And so she doesn't have a sustainability background. She speaks like 6 languages, which I would always encourage us to learn more languages. And so she's able to go to these places all over the world and connect with people. But, I wouldn't get discouraged. And I guess that's kind of my main point. Don't get discouraged if you don't have this picture perfect box of look at my amazing pedigree of all of the sustainability classes I took and the internships I had. There's no right answer, right? And especially in today's really interdisciplinary world, I think in the sustainability space, we're looking for people who are ready to stand up and think differently and be okay in complexity a bit. Yeah, thanks for that question.
Yeah, great question and incredible answer. Thank you, Elizabeth. And one other question that I think actually really nicely touches on what you had just mentioned, which was meeting people where they are, that empathy. A couple of questions regarding communication. And I think this was a suggestion that you had, which was about having those conversations, those day-to-day conversations with individuals. This could be professionally or personally. But I guess some of the questions were, how do you manage communicating with folks who potentially tune out the climate conversation for various reasons, or potentially don't see it as something of a concern?
All right, I'm going to fill up the chat box, folks. Hold on. That's why my eyes were going all over the place. First thing I'm going to pop in there. A woman I totally love and adore is Professor Dr. Catherine Hayhoe at Texas Tech. And she has a whole series on YouTube called Global Weirding. She happens to be an evangelical Christian, and she stands up every day and talks about climate, even among her community members who disagree with her. So she has some awesome videos that I highly recommend checking out. I was just scrolling through to see if there's a particular one that you might like, but that one is great. I would highly recommend checking that out. Another thing I'm going to put in the chat box, I think I'm going to find it. Yes, I found it, is some really great research. Let's see. I think there is, I'm going to send you to the general thing, but if you go to, there's something about climate. So heartwiredforchange.com. That's a group of researchers who make the case that we are not robots. We are not hardwired. And what we need to lead with when we talk specifically about climate is values. We need to connect with people over shared values. We do not need to throw numbers at people. We do not need to make people feel guilty. That works for very few people in the world, right? And often it just galvanizes our differences, or it just highlights our differences. So the folks at Heartwired for Change have done a really incredible job of writing about climate communication that way. Also, I'm going to pop in the Climate Interpreter folks. They focus on metaphors and values. So how can we, you might have noticed that I didn't really talk about greenhouse gases, because we know from research that that is a really wonky term or phrase that turns a lot of people off. Heat trapping gases, however, is more gentle and kind. And so just thinking about word choice can be really helpful. Now, in terms of how are you going to talk to somebody at the Thanksgiving dinner table, if we're sitting around tables this Thanksgiving with our family, I have my Aunt Deb is one of those people. And I think about how do I talk to her about this? And we focus on values, right? We talk about her grandkids. We talk about the things that she cares about. And I don't throw facts and figures at her. Instead, I listen to her and what she's been concerned about. And she might be concerned about the changes in fish populations in the lakes in Minnesota. And we could talk about and meet there on that point, instead of me shaming her for, something she's doing or making her feel really bad. We start to unpack that system and see the ways in which our actions are harming that system, and thinking specifically about ways we can improve that system. So she started composting just because we talked about it. So she listened in on one of my talks about climate solutions, and she's like, oh, we have curbside compost. I just never thought about it before, because let's be honest, folks, it takes some activation energy to change your behavior. I didn't compost for a while in the Bay Area because I just didn't there were too many things I had to put into place to make it happen. And then once I got that little bucket, I was like, I can do this. I could totally do this. So, I would say don't shy away from it, but also just like empathy, right? Empathy and values and setting aside the righteousness. I definitely have had hard conversations that didn't go well. And I would just say, get back on the horse and try again.
Awesome advice. Thank you, Elizabeth. One question that is from our dear friend, Mary Eggert. It's a Wisconsin related question. So I love that. The UW band, how did that band experience shape who you are? I like that question. So
yeah, that's super fun. I like it too, because I don't get to talk about my trumpet playing days very often. Thanks, Mary. I think, so for those of you not familiar with a big marching band, literally with 300 people on the same field at any time, you have to be really not only thinking about what you're doing, but very, very aware of the rest of the system. I know I keep saying system, but that's what it is, right? And I think it's such a great metaphor for the importance of not only individual behavior change when we think about climate, but also the larger ripple effects, and how if we are all in sync together, we can do amazing things. And it doesn't take that much work to get us all into sync, right? Sometimes it means it's policies. Sometimes it's, certain programs run by nonprofits. Sometimes it's education, but finding that alignment, finding when we can all high step together is a beautiful, beautiful moment. So in terms of the marching band, I look at it as a living, breathing organism that taught me an awful lot about community organizing, about working together, and also just about having fun. So thanks so much for that, Mary.
Incredible. I love it. And just one last question from a current student studying sustainable management, Laura. What to do now, right now, so she can start kind of, these are kind of challenging times as well to be a student. But what she can do now and what other students can do now, so she can kind of develop that voice. So when she does arrive to a workplace.
I love it. Thank you for continuing to take steps forward. I think that's really important now, especially as you know, we can often feel overwhelmed by the state of the world and kind of what we're seeing come through the news. So first thing is keep moving forward, right? Like keep the your you know, hold true to your values and what you really want to be working towards, and keep putting one foot in front of the other. And the way that I do that is by focusing on solutions. So to put one more plug in, I would highly recommend the Drawdown Review on our site, because it is full of solutions. We don't talk about the doom and gloom. We assume you all understand the science behind climate change. Honestly, I don't care if you understand it that much. I care that you understand that there are solutions, and there are so many you can put into place. And so I would really keep moving forward and putting those solutions into place, and figuring out, you know, don't feel overwhelmed by how many solutions there are, but rather understanding that this is a mosaic of solutions that are all working together, and we need all of them. It's not like one is like so much better than all of the others. We actually need all of these solutions. So find the passion, find what you're passionate about. Maybe it's food waste. Maybe it's focusing on land restoration. Figure out what really gets you out of bed in the morning and gets you excited, and pour yourself into that. And maybe, like me, you're a little more distractible, and I have a whole bunch of different solutions I care about, and that's amazing too. But knowing that you want to be working in all of those spaces on climate solutions, I think will keep you moving forward, and also help you you know, find where in the world you can be using your talents to do the most good for society. So thanks for taking up that charge.
Incredible. Thank you, Laura, for that question. And Elizabeth, thank you. I'll pass it over to Karina for a few final words. And Elizabeth, thank you so much. Just like I'm radiating here. So I appreciate you sharing all of that energy and positivity and your time with us today. Thank you so much.
No, you're so welcome, Stephen. Hi, Karina.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was really inspiring. You know, we did a whole workshop on Project Drawdown Solutions with FXB Climate Advocates, and it's really easy to get bogged down sort of in the technical, like what does this mean and how do you implement it? And that's really important, but it was so great to take a step back and like see the big picture. And you know, for young people to realize that, you know, you can make a difference in wherever that's aligned with your passion and your interests. And I think I can see a lot of our climate advocates are on, and so I thought that was really inspiring, and everyone will take away great lessons from your talk. So thank you so much. We're really grateful for your time. You know, this is, as you said, a very difficult time for everyone to be living in, and you know, I know that you know, the global pandemic just probably underscores the importance of taking action on climate change. So we're really grateful to you for kind of helping us set us on this path and really kick off the climate pods as well. So thank you. And to the participants, we're staying on for the next hour, and we'll have some exercises and interactive exercises to do together. And then at 6 o'clock, we will resume with another panel focusing on urban health and sustainable cities. So thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.